food for them. Nowhere to sleep.
All right. Well, there was a beautiful discussion right here before we got back on air, but welcome once again. It is the topical discussion right here on NBS Morning Breeze. And we want to take you back. Sometimes Uganda has lots and lots of stories happening here and there, and some of the stories are overtaken by events. We do not want to forget that the last week, the new school term did begin, the first school term of the academic year 2020. And it started on a high note, especially on the discussion of the new curriculum that was to be implemented starting with senior one. Of course, some schools had to have a 2 weeks extension of the holiday for the teachers, first of all, to be trained. Then there was a whole discussion in Parliament which also tried to hold the implementation of the new curriculum, with legislators coming up with a number of concerns and issues that had been raised towards the National Curriculum Development Center, as well as the Ministry of Education and Sports. We want to get back thorough to that discussion and find out how far are we with the new curriculum. Will it work for our needs, our education needs in the country? With me in studio, starting of course from my right, is none other than Mr. Matthias Mulumba, who is a curriculum specialist you major in agriculture, right?
Yes.
Yes, and that is at the National Curriculum Development Center. Please say good hello to our viewers.
Hello, viewers. Good morning, everybody. You are welcome to this show.
Pretty interesting. A teacher in that sense. And also have Mr. Benon Fred Twimnamasko from Makerere University. Of course, we've drunk quite a lot from his knowledge with this discussion right here. Benon, it's always a pleasure having you and sparing time off your busy schedule to be with us.
Good morning, Mildred, and good morning, viewers.
A good morning to you. Let's start off the discussion from the National Curriculum Development Center side. How far are we with the implementation of this new curriculum? Because there was quite a discussion coming in from Parliament trying to hold or asking that this implementation be halted. At which stage are we?
Thank you very much. I want to take you back from November. National Curriculum Development Center distributed the teaching syllabuses to the schools, and
that November was the school term still on?
Yes.
Okay.
We were doing exams at the end of the year, so these syllabuses were distributed to schools at the police stations where they were picking exams from.
Okay.
And those that did not receive were informed to come to National Curriculum Development Center and pick their copies, because we didn't have record on them. But those we had record on, we gave out the syllabuses by December. Most schools had received their copies. Then come in January, we had training of master trainers to prepare us in the implementation of the new lower secondary curriculum. And as mentioned, at the beginning of the term, we had to train 20,000 teachers to prepare for the implementation of the curriculum in senior one. And as NCDC, as Ministry of Education and Sports, we work with members of Parliament. We are still engaging them to see that they support us, because they are the ones who allocate us the funds. They are the ones who okayed the printing of the syllabuses, because they allocated us funds for printing the syllabuses and for doing prototypes and teachers' guides for their different subjects.
This is for entrepreneurship, yes.
And this is for fine art
and design.
Art and design. Those are the copies that I've carried. So the MPs have been allocating us funds to carry out these activities in preparation for the implementation.
Talking about the training of master trainers, how many teachers did come through? Because reports indicate about 7,000 teachers did miss out on this training. Just how many did you train? So
we trained 20,000 teachers across the country in 30 SESEMAT centers across the country. Myself, I was at Lango College in Lira, and I trained 530 teachers with a team of master trainers, 12 of them. So the other centers did the same.
Okay. When developing this particular curriculum, especially on the discussion you had on what subjects would be selective and what subjects would be elective, what exactly did you consider?
We looked at our economic conditions, our status right now. Most of our learners are coming from the rural communities. They don't have opportunities to get access to the developments that are taking place in this era, the digital era. So we decided that to give basic education and produce a holistic individual who can have a sustainable livelihood, we need to give that learner a broad spectrum of 11 compulsory subjects. And then...
What exactly did you consider choosing the compulsory subjects?
I just want to take you to the fact that these subjects, as we know them, we considered that what will produce a holistic person, you need to get an all-around person. That was key. A person who can communicate, how we can acquire generic skills, how we can get introduced to the digital era, the current era, which is digital, and how do we prepare for the future.
Okay.
So all of those factors put together, we decided that to produce a holistic person for personal and national development, the 11 subjects could be key.
Let's look at the selectives. Before I go to Mr. Twina Masco, one of the concerns of some members of parliament was that how then do you bring a subject like agriculture become a selective one, yet a greater percentage of Ugandans, so to say, over 68%, are involved in agriculture and still subsistence, because the president is continuously singing about commercializing agriculture, and yet you still make it one of the selective subjects. Let's have that discussion. What did you consider in the selective aspect?
Yeah, it is a very good question which everybody is asking, but I have two things to say. One, to define agriculture and peasant farming, we need to separate that too. The 80% or the 60% that are doing agriculture, they are really peasants. They do farming with limited resources. They don't have modern skills. That is one. Then for agriculture that we want to teach in school, it should be teaching agriculture using science. For instance, how many plants do I need to have to feed, to produce food for a family of 5? So if you had 56 maize plants in a given area, then you are sure 5 family members can have food for a week. That is scientific. It is not to produce little and sometimes even you don't have enough, but every day you are going to dig. That is the peasantry approach. Right from 1911, agriculture has never been compulsory. It is an elective. And in 1911, when the colonial administration was starting agriculture, they realized that it required a vast amount of resources and needed to be done scientifically. So they established Bukalasa and Serere as areas where agriculture could be started. And when Makerere was being offered the opportunity to teach, they had to have Kabanyoro, a university farm, where agriculture could be done or in scientific way, such that the learner who comes out makes an impression to the society that it is important when you do agriculture, you do it differently from the peasants. Yeah.
All right, I'll be coming back to you. Mr. Twina Masco, what do you make of this new curriculum and the organization, especially in terms of what becomes a selective and what becomes a compulsory subject?
So I will start from the concerns I had when the curriculum was being brought about and the reason why I got concerned. So in around 2016 is when I got so engrossed in this. And this was after watching several of the members of the NCDC trying to popularize that then new curriculum which they had brought. And like he has said, the issue was to produce a holistic individual after the cycle of the education.
Yes.
And because I'm more leaning to science, they were saying there are some parts of knowledge in some of the curricula that is obsolete. But in science, I don't find anything obsolete. If you go to physics, everything that was there in the 1900s are still valid. They are still existing. For example, yesterday when the director of NCDC was trying to say, we now want to make kids be better because we are moving to the robotics soon. Robotics use the basics of physics. You don't have to do anything else apart from knowing the speed it will use and do simple programming to make them do whatever you want for artificial intelligence if you want. But you need the basics. So when they said all those things and said terminologies have to be removed, some of the terminologies are too hard for kids, we want to reduce the textbooks to something which is more palatable to kids. We make sure that our teachers are able to make books. My concern was, if the teachers probably are finding physics textbooks hard, how are they going to simplify them to be simple for these children? Two, the other part was to decolonize the curriculum. It was created, it was started in the 60s, we have used it for a long time, we need to decolonize it. The physics taught in Uganda is the physics taught in the USA, is the physics taught in China. Chinese produced a magnet or discovered a magnet, we use them here. So that also brought a concern to me. And then I went to the actual books of the learning area for science.
Okay.
And when I was now trying to see how are they now integrating into processes, systems, interactions, energy and whatever, the originator was Irish, the checker was Irish, the approver was Irish. These are 3 consultants, all being Irish, but they want to give it now a conception, a perception of an decolonized, yeah. But it is still being funding is not my problem, but you are still consulting from 3 Irish. You want them to give you an African perspective. So that was my origin of a concern about our curriculum. So what do I see, or what do I want to be done? One, a curriculum, as he's saying, should begin from the users. You go to Chikuba,
especially in aspects of consultation.
Yes,
and involvement.
You go to Chikubo and ask people. We know that you are doing accountant by luck, because you are doing business. You have never been in a commerce class, but you are able to keep records of your work and you are progressing. What do you think a child should be taught, or how should a child be practical to be able to be a successful Chikubo person? You go to Meta and ask what kind of person do you want in order to work on your gardens and be able to be a good worker and be able to be concerned about your either mechanization of your tractors, or actually how the sugarcane grows, or the tea plantations. How can we get somebody that can be better? They come to the TV and say, if you wanted an ICT person or somebody to work with the cameras, what should they be taught? What should be integrated? What do you normally do? And then, on the other good note, they could have come to the university. I know they could have gone to other universities. But also they could have asked, because when I asked my whole department, did anyone to get consulted? Because me, I may be a small man somewhere in the corner, and I was
and your seniors are consulted.
And if the senior, I asked the professors, who of you was consulted, so that I know what was going on. They said, we don't even know this thing. So, for example, this manual he showed you has previous, for physics, has previous knowledge-based curriculum where a teacher is a senior, teacher-centered, as they say. And the new one says, the competence-based curriculum says that there should be now discussion. Physics is peculiar, and more other science subjects. Some of the things we don't need discussions. Alimentary canal, you'll put here food and it will come out somewhere. There is no argument about it. You can't change anything. So there are things which we just find easy to put on paper, but when we go to practicals, it becomes a problem.
All right, I want to hold you.
So, but
maybe as you conclude.
Let me finish this, because yes. I'm now concluding. If they started by giving schools laboratory equipment,
okay,
they give schools enough teachers, and then they say, you make sure that you ask questions that tickle a student to explain what they studied, not to give you what they crammed. That would be a good beginning. And then that first cycle, we would say now students, that's how they would have tested the old curriculum and seen the results. and then eventually we would do the paperwork and change everything and document it.
Okay. Partly what I pick from Benon's submissions is one, which also the members of parliament did raise, a cross-section of them, that there was not adequate consultation of the stakeholders. Just how much did you consult to come up with this new curriculum?
Thank you.
And who was consulted particularly?
Okay. I want to tell you that curriculum development is a process, and since 1987, the Ugandan community has been consulted. The Education Policy Review Commission, which was led by Professor Senta Zakajubi, which gave rise to the government white paper of 1992, was part of the consultation, and one of the biggest recommendations was that we needed to change the way we teach from early childhood education to university. Our friends in the university have been doing a lot of changes, but as NCDC, we did change. The early childhood learning framework was produced. We did the thematic curriculum and rolled it out in the primary schools.
Is it even practical?
It is.
So to say?
It is, because there are two things. There is what we call curriculum fidelity and curriculum adaptation. Some people who were told that we are teaching learners in the primary school using themes, and we wanted the transition of a child from home, where they have been speaking their mother tongue, to come to school the first 3 years to use the local language. And the district language boards were formed at that time such that they could promote the use of local language, because as the child transits from the mother, they have been speaking in one language, they should not come to school and get a shock. They should be transitioned. Ourselves, myself, I was taught in local language up to P4. So I don't think that it is a magic to start teaching people in English. I learned the English words along the way. In P4, that's when English was introduced to us as a subject of and as a medium of instruction. But in primary, 1, 2, 3, we did our studies in local language, like we were speaking at home. So the words were easy to conceptualize, and as we built the more new English words in P4, we had accumulated a good number of them, and then we were able to move on. Then at the end of working on the primary, in 2009, or let me start from 2006, when Honorable Bitamazire was Minister of Education, she went to Cabinet to seek audience, and she got a minute that we needed to have sweeping changes in the lower secondary curriculum. And that minute is there. A study was instituted by the Ministry of Education and Sports in 2007. A report was produced, and in Chapter 2, it highlights the challenges that we had to change our curriculum. That one I don't want to go to. As an emergency measure, some subjects were suspended. And
yes,
in
around 2008.
Then in 2009, when Mr. Agaba was the commissioner, he produced a circular on behalf of the ministry to guide schools, and Honorable Bitamazire signed it on how we prepare for the big change. So this process has been going on. In 2012, we carried out a labor market survey where we went across the country and interviewed 141 enterprises. They gave us insight in what they want a graduate of secondary to be taught, and some of the challenges were about communication skills, problem solving, following instructions.
Is there a particular mode of selection of who is consulted and who is not consulted? Because Mr. Twinamasko clearly is telling you that he asked, probably he might have not been, but asked some of his colleagues who have also not been consulted. and many other stakeholders are actually raising quite a number of reservations.
That is the most...
Are you considering this?
We did consult, but in Uganda, the biggest challenge we have is the don't care attitude. Most people, when things are not very close to them, we are so much preoccupied with some other issues. But NCDC works with panels, and each panel has representatives. Our chairperson, governing council for all the years, for me I joined the NCDC in 2010, comes from the School of Education. And we use constituencies. So those constituencies, we expect as NCDC that they, when they go back, they share what they have had. So like I know in 2011, some people whom I quickly know that they have been involved. Dr. New has been there, Dr. Tivenkana has been there. Okay, most of them are from the School of Education, and they have been engaged in this process. So
you feel satisfied with the kind of stakeholder engagement that you've taken on for
we cannot
to
bring
develop this new
everybody,
curriculum?
But all the same, we did what the constituencies that are mandated were supposed to come in, and when we expected them that when they go back, they share these changes.
Okay.
Then we carried out curriculum situation analysis in schools in Uganda, and we came out with a report. We made a public rally in Mbale, we made a public rally in Kampala about the curriculum, and it was captured in the newspaper. We had a shaping day at NCDC. Different people brought ideas in September 2012. They brought their ideas. We went to Education Sector Consultative Committee in the Ministry of Education in 2013, where different educational partners sit, and we engaged them on the developments of the change in the curriculum.
Okay.
And in 2015, we had the members of parliament, when Honorable Namabide was the chairperson of the Education Committee. We've been engaging. Then in 2016, we had several engagements with different stakeholders, including the vice chancellors. The vice chancellors forum, I remember I was first taken to Serena Hotel on the lake, where the vice chancellors were, and we were discussing. We also, in the mountains of the moon, we were talking with the vice chancellors and the academic registrars of these institutions, because that is the constituency.
But some of them seem to be not at par with what has been developed, but we will be talking about that. Mr. Twena Masko, away from the consultation, because we already have a document, right, which has been developed, and probably we can't go back to start consultation once again. Do you have faith that this new curriculum will produce the holistic person graduate from a school at whatever level, whether dropped out from senior 4-6 or a graduate from university? Will this produce us that person we need in society to be a problem solver?
Okay, so now the issue is that we have a tendency now to go vocational. Everyone wants to be vocational. So I will dwell where I know I'm more knowledgeable. I'm not more knowledgeable in physics.
Physics, yes.
There is no section of physics where you don't have to do a practical bit.
All right.
Every part or every topic in physics, from mechanics to optics. I'll give an example of a car. The car will be my model. When you are moving with the car as it moves, that's mechanics. When you are looking in the mirrors, that is optics. When the engine is turning, that is thermodynamics. When you are using the radio, that's electronics and waves, because you are receiving the waves from somewhere. So like a car is a model laboratory if you were to show what the kid is being taught. Now my issue is, if we were giving the children a chance to go to the labs every time, because they have paper 3 for UNEB, which is specifically for practicals. It's a practical paper. If they were to do those bits every time they do a theory, they go to the lab and do the practical. Theory, practical. Theory, practical. You teach an engine in thermodynamics, they go to an engine and see it working. At least a generator. You teach a generator in electricity and you also take them and they see how it is producing electricity. You would get a vocational kid. Your child would come out of school knowing how to fix a bulb, knowing how to fix a car tire at least, because you'll be knowing when you are turning a screw, you go this way and go that way. When you produce this new curriculum, which we are calling new, and then you have just reduced the subjects, 43 to 21, 11 compulsory, you haven't touched the labs. You are saying I will be lucky that teachers will be available to be able to engage students after 250. Then you tell me now we are relaxing them because they were too compacted. The slang was that we are over pumping the students. Now you are even making them relaxed. The labs are not sufficient. The teachers are not sufficient. You don't have enough lab technicians. I'm worried you will produce now a lower quality holistic thing that you were trying
than even what you had before.
You had before.
And this is where I want you to come in. Do you look at such aspects that Benon is talking about? Because absenteeism has been very key, top on the agenda being talked about. Whenever results are being released, practicals are poorly done because students sometimes even face reagents, chemical reagents, during their UNEB exams.
Yeah, thank you very much. You realize we are talking about a competence-based curriculum, and in my understanding, competence means what can you do when you have interacted with me. So we want every topic, as Twinamasko has said, the teacher should give the learner the opportunity to do. We should follow Kolob's theory. You discover, you explore, you analyze, and you apply. It should be clear to all teachers.
Who takes the brunt? Who bears that, that entire...
As Ministry of Education and Sports, we work as a team running a relay. And the teacher training should come in fully handed to train the teachers to do hands-on. I know that the Ministry of Education and Sports has been constructing labs, and it distributed science kits to support the teaching.
That are not sufficient.
The teaching, okay, they are not sufficient, but
do not
it is an
commensurate
effort
with the numbers.
Yeah, we are not going to stop the mothers in Uganda to stop producing 7 children per younger woman. We are not going to stop. But we are making steps as ministry that science should be taught practically. Now the onus is on the teacher training to ensure that when the people are coming out of the institution, they have gone through practically. We should all turn competence-based because, as Twinamasko has said, teachers should do exactly what he's saying. We use the Kaze model, for instance, in that case. But in agriculture, I don't want to see the teachers teaching vegetable growing on the blackboard. I want them to grow the cabbage, go through all the processes of growing the cabbage, harvest it, go and stand in the market store and sell their cabbage such that they see the whole value chain, how it works. That's what I expect. So in the new lower secondary curriculum, we are saying it is competence-based, and the assessment, as he put it, needs to be, assessment comes from the word assidere from Latin, which means make me as good as yourself, the expert. And formative assessment, which is encouraged in the new lower secondary curriculum, is about sit beside me and make me as good as yourself. Like our mothers, when they are teaching us our mother tongue, they sit beside us and make sure that we are good. There is no exam, there is no set time that now I want to test if you have learned how to greet. No. They just give you the opportunity to greet, and when you are not doing the way the mother is expecting, we'll correct you, we'll support you, scaffold you such that you are good as herself. Matthias,
let's get realistic on this. You are implementing a curriculum in an education system that is overly taken up by the private sector, I want to say. A private sector that is more paying attention to the grades. How many first grades do I have? How many people did pass with 4s and you know, all that. There are no gardens probably for students to be able to practice. And some of these laboratories and equipment also not available in some of the in some of the private schools. How are you going to rein in on those? Let alone government, which also doesn't have the equipment, and government is trying.
Yeah.
Yes.
You are right. Learning does not stop. So we welcome all of the private sector involvement in education. We want all of them because, as mentioned, our population is growing. In 1958, we were only 5 million. Now we are about 41 million. So it is important that they come on board to support the government in the delivery of education. But they need education. How does a school look like? There are a few. If I looked at private schools, I can look at Watoto in Nachirebe. That is a model school, which was like the one I studied in when I was a younger person. A school had a compound, a school had a garden.
We are now building skyscrapers in compounds.
And that is now the issue. We need to educate our partners who are not educationists to know what are the requirements of a good learning environment, a safe learning environment, a gender-friendly learning environment. We need to do that education. In the recent past, UNICEF has been trying to teach different people about a good, safe learning environment. And those educational development partners should continue their role as well, such that we get what is a good learning environment. How many children should be in a classroom? During my time, we were only 30.
Aren't you talking ideally? Like
it is
the ideal of what should really be happening, but that's exactly not what is on ground.
We need to go to the ideal. We should work. We should not just do things, two wrong things, and we think they make it right. No, we should focus on standards, the market standards in education. What are they? It is not about just thinking out of the blue that I need a school, you cram it in the middle of the town where there is no playground. Like now, the kids, when you go at State Square at 5, the kids, because we have taken away their playing grounds in the Kampala schools, when they reach there, where there is that green space and there is cemented floor, they are running and they are knocking the people because at school they had no opportunity, there was no space.
Okay, I will hold you a little bit right there. Mr. Twinamasco, let's be realistic with our curriculum and what exactly we are going to be getting out. What needs to be done for us to produce that graduate that is holistic? What is missing out in our curriculum, even including the new one, which is implemented? Because maybe years after we will say this and this and this needs to be changed about the curriculum.
So I'm glad that you asked the idea of being ideal. What he was talking is the paperwork, these nicely produced books.
Yeah, the black and white.
Very nicely written, and you say a school should have this, but here is the reality. Now, I know they did the market survey. I am not arguing about that. But if we were to ask that, how many schools in Uganda have labs, at least half equipped? How many schools don't have any lab? How many schools will be able to implement PE because of the pitches? How many? So if they had that information, that would be fine. But what should we do?
Exactly.
What should we do is that, for example, like I said, I will use physics more, is that let a teacher teach not having pressure of UNEB. Not just because you have introduced the 20% formative assessment, which is progressive, and which also has some issues, because a kid is changed from I'm a policeman in Kabale, and then they transfer me to Gulu. I go with my child. They say they will give them a code, and you know the kind of risks in those things. Yes. That I was having some marks already when I was in Kabale. Then they take me to a Gulu school. They have to look for my code and continue giving me the assessment. So they integrate a bit on that. Now then you have also the integrity on private schools, how they are going to manage the 20%. What would be that rating? What is the standard that we are going to follow so that all schools give, because I can give a test for assessment, I make sure, even, because some schools even copy for kids, when they go on the board and say, on this number, put this, as they give T to the scout person who came at the UNEB. So, I will give two examples in physics, which many people, one time someone said he cut off physics because of that. Is what they call Brownian motion, that smoke particles move randomly. People smoke. Even in our kitchens, most of the villages, there is smoke.
There is smoke, yeah.
When I would be in the kitchen in the village and it is early morning and the sunlight is going through, a ray is going through, and you are sweeping the floor and also cooking, you would see smoke particles moving randomly. When the teacher talked of Brownian motion and said smoke particles move randomly, for me it was common sense because I was seeing it at home. How many schools can at least get a smoke and put this smoke in a Coca-Cola bottle and be able to see those random? That's something you don't need to buy any laboratory equipment on that. Even if you are in a village and you roll out a pendulum bob, what they call a pendulum bob, but you roll a crumb of soil dry it up so that it is a bit heavy and you get a string. You'll do an experiment in physics. But because of our economics, when the ministry now says we have funding and the school needs to get, someone has to go to UK.
So isn't that an indictment also on the teachers themselves, who would have made some of these experiments much more life-based and much easy?
Thank you very much. So let me finish the other example and then I get to you. The other example is of a detergent. I have a friend who used to wash clothes by soaking them in water and then pours the detergent and then starts squeezing to now clean them. In senior 2, we study what they call van der Waals forces, which hold the water molecules together. The detergent, its purpose is to make sure that they are detached. So when you see someone doing the detergent like this, whether beating, I don't know what to call it, you are trying to break the other bonds so that the water particles can go into the garment and remove the dirt. But the teacher said, make sure this is surface tension, cram this and be able to do it in exam. This is something we do every day. Now, where do teachers come from? They come from us and the university will teach them, and I teach a bunch of students. I'm almost closing into 200 students in one of the courses I'm teaching. How many lab equipments are going to use? I don't want to raise an alarm here. So if
you definitely don't have as much as you need.
I'm now having 6 experiments. Probably 3 of them have only one set, and probably the other 2 have probably 3 or 4 sets on 200 students, and I have to make sure they have all seen what I'm teaching them by the end of the 4 months. This is at the university. And I'm teaching teachers who are going to meet these people for retooling to make sure that what I gave them, they give it. That's where my concerns are. I'm not going to sit back and say, okay, let's go on, but I want to highlight the problems. If at the university, last academic year I had 7 students per set at a university. And some of the occasions they would be doing a practical, which I should have taught towards the end, because we changed the curriculum, as he said that universities have changed the curriculum. We changed the curriculum. Previously, we would do practicals alone. Every year, we had a practical course for each of the 3 years, and then theory. And by God's mercy, we thought they could meet a practical that relates to the theory. So we said, let's change the curriculum so that whatever course content I teach it theoretically, we go to the lab and do it. But the funding was not enough to buy enough equipment. So now,
who bears the brunt now to ensure that you have the equipment for all the experiments? Because at the end of the day, you're teaching someone who is going to teach my son or daughter and the next person coming through.
So the change should be that the Curriculum Development Center looks at the curriculum, sees the gaps, tells the Ministry of Education and says, in order to produce this kind of child, they need to have the ideal he was talking about, the pitches, the labs, and the like. Now, the ministry should go to Parliament and say, we want to have this amount of money to make sure that we get A, B, C, D.
And Parliament will say we don't have the money.
But we borrow to make whatever we've been borrowing. So why don't we borrow for the necessities that we can really, if we want to produce somebody, let's borrow for something that will make us produce someone who will be better for the future. We shall continue just talking about this theoretically and in a ideal situation, but on the ground, my worries are that apart from this 80% they are leaving for UNEB, even everybody would still want the 80%. So still it would be examination oriented if we don't retool a teacher to make sure that they now feel at home.
Okay. I want to realistically talk about some of the challenges you faced developing this curriculum, which looks good on paper. And like Mr. Twinamasko said, the problem will be coming out on the implementation. What are some of those challenges?
Well, okay, one is fear of change. That is the biggest challenge, fear of change. Since 1992, this country has a group of people who fear change. They live in 4 stages of the change process. 1, they deny They want to keep the status
But you know
quo.
the fear has something at the back. It's just not the fear, but it is, we are fearing because of this and this and this.
Like I want to use the Uganda proverb that it's somebody who takes you at night, you only praise him in the morning.
Okay.
That's the Uganda proverb, my translation.
Literally translated.
Literally
yes.
translated. So change is a process, and many of us, we go through denial is key. Many people go through resistance, and it would be, resistance has been there. One very, very big resistance, like he mentioned, by the exam.
Including the government in power, it was a resistance. Yeah. So fear of change was one of them. What next?
Another one is we come to a stage where people accept, then we get the commitment, is saying that we go to borrow money, we get the commitment to ensure that we get the resources to create the standards that education requires. Because if we are to create quality, we need high level commitment. And then the other one is being intentional. As a country, we need to be intentional. Most people are doing what I call just do it for the sake of it, but we are not intentional. So one of the things, like he was mentioning, somebody doesn't know that to train a good teacher, he needs to get the best of the best training. We must educate people on that. So lack of education is another very, very big challenge we faced.
Okay.
Then awareness, creating awareness has been a very, very big challenge. And I want to thank NBS now. I'm creating awareness to see that people know what we are doing. We need to be on the TV, on the radio, on the street, to tell everybody that change is there.
Okay.
So that was another big challenge we faced when you start talking. Then the other one, that I call it the poverty syndrome. There is a poverty syndrome. You are too preoccupied only to get what to eat today. That future thinking, now we are in the fourth industrial revolution, but some people even don't know. They still think in the second industrial revolution. Like some people are pushing their children to get certificates for jobs that do not exist. Some people in the DOS's office, in the secondary schools, are guiding children on things that does not exist. And
that's the retooling you were talking about, and also Benon was talking about.
Yes, we need to make them come up to speed and up to date. Because if we don't do that, they will continue misleading. They will be like somebody having very many dogs and a net and spears is at City Square and is saying the antelopes are there at Mapera House. The antelopes went long ago.
All right, 20,000 teachers have been retooled or trained in this case, and the new curriculum will be rolled out. That's what we can say.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I mean, time is really against us. Mr. Twimna Mascot, thank you so much for the for your contributions, and I do hope that Ministry of Education can pay attention, because you are the people who train the teachers who are going to train the students out there. That's all we had time for, but this is a conversation we want to continue with online, and that will be at Mildred Tohaise personally, but at NBS TV on Twitter, NBS Television, Facebook, and Next Media Services. This is a conversation we'll definitely have the two gentlemen back to have a discussion on progressively as we go on with the implementation of the new curriculum. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Have a lovely morning.